Okay, now, I was, a lot of people call me the Bonner hooligan, and that's for a good reason. I went to school here also. So with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. Don Felton, Kathy Milodragovich, if I got that right from Butte. Okay, Kim Briggeman, Judy Karl. Well, I saw Judy the other day. We were doing a thing for the kids down at our history center, and I believe she stopped by to get the mail. That little class of kids in there came unsoldered. I never seen a better display of affection for students to a teacher than that day. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. That was my last year's class, the last class I taught at Bonner School.
Oh man, what an experience. That was worth it. So, let's get back to the hooligan. When we decided to do the Bonner School history, I got the old scrapbook out, and I looked in there, and I saw graduating class of 1957. Reached right out, slapped me alongside the head, the number 57. And I kind of chuckled over that, and then I crunched some numbers and found that it has been 57 years since I graduated Bonner. Now, that threw me in a kind of a state of shock. 57 years since I graduated school. But then when I look out over the audience, I don't feel quite so bad. I see Kenny Piers. He got lots of years on me. Lefty, where's Lefty at? He got years on me. Who else can go way, way back into history? Lois. Cool. Bob, you betcha. Willie. So now I don't feel quite so bad. So with that, I have to wind up by stating that the lumberjack chapter of my life was probably as rewarding as any I've ever experienced. It was makes me proud to be part of the old Bonner School. And I got to salute once again the teachers and the staff that worked at that school to make this possible for me and countless other students. Okay, with that, I promised Kim I'd keep myself down a little bit. I don't go rambling on. So that's what I have to say as far as my experiences with Bonner School. Is there anything else I need to cover?
I can't think of any.
Okay.
No, not tonight.
All right, with that, I'll go sit down. Shut up and get out of your hair.
We'll introduce the panel in a few minutes here, but just so you understand, this is we've assembled a panel, the Bonner History Roundtable, which I'm not actually a part of, but they asked teachers who had been students at Bonner School to come. We had a seat for one more, Karen Lang Hansen, and she wasn't able to make it. So the three teachers we have here were all graduates of Bonner School, as well as longtime teachers of Bonner School. I thought maybe we could start with getting some exercise. If all Bonner grade school graduates could stand up.
Stand up.
And now in a minute I'm going to ask by category for you to sit down again, but when you do that, I'd like you to call out your favorite teacher from Bonner School. And so let's start out with anybody who's graduated from Bonner since 2000. And nobody. How about the 1990s? Come on, Aislinn. Who's your teacher?
They're all.
Very diplomatic. She's sitting next to her mom. Okay. 1980s.
It was Mrs. Marsh when I had her.
Thank you. 1970s. I would be sitting down in that category. 1960s. Mr. Burlingame? Second that motion. Okay.
I'll go with Maurice Darrington, this would be different.
Thank you, Tom. 1950s. Go ahead and shout out.
Miss Bland, later known as Mrs. Trammell.
Mr. Mel. Okay.
I'd go with her also.
Thank you.
Oh, Mike Nelson goes with Mrs. Trammell, as we knew her. Swan, yes. We have a lot of their pictures over here on the wall. 1940s. Oh, no, that was 50s, Shirley. But you can. Do you have a 50s?
Yeah, Adele and I, we both graduated in '56. Now, we were the last class out of the old Bonner School, and then they tore it down.
But who was your favorite teacher?
Well, you know, we had Mr. Burlingame in the 5th and in the 6th grade, so I do think Burley was probably my favorite. They all were, they were all. I'll have to say Miss CUNY.
Miss Kitty. Who we have a picture of over here. Okay. Do it. Boy, we have Hazel Splan. Wow. Okay. So now, where are we at now? We're on the 40s. Okay. Okay. Willie. 40s. What? Who's your teacher? All of them. Okay. There's none of them around now. Okay. Now, do we have anybody that graduated in the 30s? So could I have the 40s graduates stand back up?
And I have to say Mrs. Wagner, because she was one of my favorites. Most everybody hasn't even heard of her, probably.
Mrs. Wagner?
Mrs. Wagner. Third grade. A long time ago.
So you guys that graduated in the 40s, if you graduated from between 48 and 50, let's say, could you sit down?
I was married.
How about 45 to 48? Or 47, I guess. So Lefty's the last one standing. 1942. Lefty Pleasant, 1942. Lefty, thank you.
My dad was on the school board, that's why I got out there early.
Well, thanks. I didn't know how far back we'd be able to go there, but I appreciate, I thought that was a good way to get some exercise, I guess. There's a lot of memory lanes that we're going to travel down here today probably, and you don't need to listen too much to mine, but I went to school in the 60s at Bonner, and so there's not probably a whole lot that I remember, but I do remember the voices of my teachers, and maybe you guys can identify with some of these. My first grade teacher was Mrs. Naomi Hall, Mrs. Hall, and I can hear her voice. Second grade was Mrs. Bonnie Elms.
Helms.
Elms.
Helms.
No, it was Elm.
Okay.
ELM, I think. I can't remember.
That's right.
Third grade was Maurice Darrington. Fourth grade was Hazel Termel at that time, but most of you remember her as Hazel Splan. Fifth grade, Florence Saunders.
Yes.
Sixth grade, Tony Terrio, whose daughter came back to teach at Bonner, Colleen Martell.
She still subs there.
Colleen still subs there. Oh, didn't realize that. And seventh grade was Mr. Larry Burlingame, and my eighth grade teacher was Mildred Dufresne. And so those voices I can hear. Do you guys that were graduates there that went to Bonner School remember the smell when you walked across the gym, not in your street shoes, by the way, but you went back to that back equipment closet in the back corner, and you opened that. Do you remember what that smelled like? The mats and the balls. You get that smell? The other smell that one of the other smells that stand out to me were, of course, the lunchroom, the cafeteria, especially the days when we had chili and cinnamon rolls in the 60s. You can smell that now. and then the other, ever-present smell to me was the wood smoke when you stepped outside for recess or off the bus. Boy, I miss that smell. Bus time for grade 6. How many people have heard that over the intercom in the new school? Mrs. Demons, bus time for grade 3, bus time for grades 5. Mrs. Hall, my first grade teacher, she had those long red fingernails, painted fingernails with the dangling earrings and the, I don't know what you call it, the honey bun beehive, that's it. Haircut. We loved Mrs. Hall. On a November afternoon, right after noon recess, when we came into second grade, Mr. Musburger leaned in the door. We were all seated. Mr. Musburger leaned in the door, and he kind of, I can picture him now. He kind of rubbed his fingers together, and he caught Mrs. Elm's eye, and he just nodded. And she turned to us and said, "Boys and girls," and we had probably heard of John F. Kennedy, but I think it was the first time I ever heard the word assassinated, and that was of course in 1963. I think the first time that the word Vietnam ever entered into my conscience was on the bus home one day, probably not many years after that, when George Otto was driving us home, and one of the older students was talking about Vietnam. I didn't even know what Vietnam was at that time. Mr. Burlingame taught us the Whiff and Poof song. We were poor little lambs who had lost our way, and Mr. Burlingame taught us every word to a lot of songs. From that to Leaving on a Jet Plane by Peter, Paul, and Mary. By the time I got in 7th and 8th grade, near the end of the 60s, we were introduced to, I guess, quoting pithy comments like, "Sock it to me," and "Here come the judge," and "Look that up in your funkin' wagnalls." That dates me there. Mrs. Dufresne, when it came time to choose our 8th grade graduation songs, instead of maybe the Beatles and Let It Be, she picked 2 New Christy Minstrel songs. One was What Color is God's Skin? And the other one was, Gee, I'm Looking Forward to the Future. So I guess I do remember some things from way back when. So my job actually is not to stand up here and yammer. I was actually volunteered, I guess, to kind of do a put Bonner School in a historical perspective. And but doing that, I think the easiest way to look at, or one way to look at the history of Bonner School is the three schools that have served Bonner School District. The first one, and I got to get my notes for this. The first one was, first classes were in 1889 in what became, I guess, called various things, but the Masonic Hall at the far end of Bonner. 1989 until 1907, when Bonner School students moved into the two-story wooden building basically between here and the school that sits there now. That was until 1957, and somebody correct me on this, the classes moved into the present school building at over Christmas break of 1957, so started classes in 1958. And that's the building with many additions that we've been in ever since, and these last 57 years. So essentially, the first school was used for roughly 18 years. Then the next one was for 50 years, and now we're on 57 years in our third school. The first school was people older than I remember where it was. But as I understand it, it was near the railroad tracks on the right-hand side of the highway as you went up at the end of Bonner, correct? And Lefty, I think you told me one time it was basically where those last two houses are on the right-hand side, or closer to the railroad crossing.
It was close to the railroad crossing, and they took it out, I think, right after the war, 1946.
Okay.
They turned the building down. But we had it as kids, and Lois can know this, Lois Johnson. We had it as kids, we used it for dance hall and recreation and everything.
Right.
The company let us use it.
Oh, he's talking.
That was a schoolhouse.
Right, okay. One of the Bible of Bonner history is this book, and I hope most of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, I think they're still on sale. Do you know? At the school for $20. This was done in 1976, put together mostly by teachers of the school at that time, and several of you here, I'm sure, had part in this book. One of the coups that Gladys Peterson pulled when she was kind of the editor of the book was she made contact in 1975 or 76 with a lady named Georgina Fenwick, who lived at the time in San Francisco. She must have been about 95 years old, but she was a student at the first class of Bonner in 1889. And so she provided for this book a reminiscence of the school and of Bonner back then. And so I thought I'd just read that to you, part of that, if I can find it. So, and Georgina died shortly after that, after she wrote this, and I think even before the book was published. So it really was a treasure to get in this book. I was 8 in 1889 when I moved from Helena to Bonner with my parents and my younger sister and brother, who were both too young to go to school. Margaret Robinson was my first teacher. The schoolroom was upstairs in the Masonic building. We sat on benches in front of desks for four pupils. In one corner, a wood stove heated the room in winter, and in the opposite corner was a pail of drinking water and a tin dipper. The pupils were the usual mixture found in a Milltown of that era: French Canadians, Scandinavians, Canadians, and Midwest Americans. In the old school registers are the names Cormier, Nearman, LeBeau, LaPointe, Manville, Saylor, Newport, Kleinig, Graham, Fenwick. I remember about 25 pupils in that room, and Miss Robinson taught all 8 grades. There were several big boys and girls who could have created problems for a less experienced teacher, but she was a firm disciplinarian, maintaining order with great skill and good humor, and she was very pretty. There were blackboards and shelves for books and a table on a raised platform where the teacher sat. Children came to the front of the room to recite their lessons when their names were called. Few pupils went beyond the 8th grade. Some would drop out before the great event of graduation. Recess was the highlight of our day except lunchtime. When the weather was nice, we played Run, Sheep, Run, Prisoner's Base, Kick the Can, and unsophisticated baseball. In the winter, the deep snow was all around, but we had our sleds for racing down the hill behind the school. We skied on barrel staves and had many a snow fight. The first classes went to school in probably, she wasn't able to pin down the exact date, but it was in the fall of 1890 or 1889 in Bonner, Montana territory. We were in a state for a few months after that, and when you think about it, that was what, 13 years after the if you were a 13-year-old kid in that first class, you were born the year of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The school being on the far end of Bonner at that time served basically just what we know of as Bonner in the Mill area. But as we spread out here in Bonner, Milltown grew up, it became an issue how far kids had to go to get to school. And when you think about it, Milltown, or Finntown as it was known back then, was, I guess, the workers' kids. And part of this book talks about the time in our history where the school rivalries of the Bonner Punks and the Milltown Skunks. And while I mean, it sounds somewhat humorous now, I think there were times when it became a serious issue, and the principal of the school, Mr. Aiken at those times, had to take measures to quell those kind of rivalries, because you had basically the boss's kids in Bonner and the workers' kids in Milltown, West Riverside, Piltsville, etc. And that was an important part of Will Aiken's legacy as a principal. I'll get into that in just a minute. So when the Anaconda Company ended up buying the mill in 1898 or so, it became clear that they needed a new location for a school, and they formed a new school district, passed the first bond issue, I think, or first mill levy, and built the 1907, the second school in 1907, which was closer to the growing community. The three, I can't cover, I'm not going to try to cover everything, but the three superintendents in the, I guess the ones that you folks will remember, starting with Mr. Aiken, Mr. Will Aiken, his pictures, there's several pictures of him over there that Miney Smith of the History Center has run off, but he was, I think still is the longest serving superintendent of Bonner School. He started in 1913, he retired in 1945, and he served every year of those years except for the World War I year, 1917 to 1918. So, and then he was followed by Frank Lightfoot, who was there from 1945 to 1952, followed by Leo Musburger from 1952 to 1974. And I'm guessing that those three cover pretty much everybody in here that went to Bonner School. William Aiken, again in this book, Bill Susie, who was a student at Bonner and also a teacher, he was the manual training teacher for 11 years. He wrote a piece, or some observations for the book, and he said, W.F. Aiken had as much influence on the communities of Bonner, Milltown, and Piltsville as any other single individual in their history. He established Bonner School as a consistent leader among grade schools in all of western Montana. And again, he retired in 1945 and was replaced by Frank Lightfoot. I put together a quick timeline to kind of give you an idea of when things developed at Bonner School. The first B, Bill Doucette's for 8th grade class of 1943 was the first to put the B on the mountain. 1948, the new brick gym and kitchen separated from the school, but we had the wooden schoolhouse essentially, but in 1948 they built the gym that's there now, which had the cafeteria on the stage, if I remember right. 1949, the PTA was formed. 1950, the first hot lunch program, and the PTA helped establish that. 1952, according to Dusty Dayshaw, was when ballpoint pens were introduced in the school. Then 1953, and this was as Mr. Musburger's tenure began, the tradition of the 8th grade class visiting the state legislature and the Capitol and the bank and the Historical Society, I think that became a 7th and 8th grade tradition. And I don't know, does it still continue? No. Okay. 1954, Mr. Burlingame was the Cub Master in the basement of the boys, or the Cub Scout Master in the basement of the old second school. 1958, we moved into the school number 3, the current school, after Christmas break, and that was the one that, of course, featured that 30-foot Walter Hook mural in the cafeteria at the time that is since now on the wall in the school library. And then finally in 1958, also Lee Farrell spearheaded the first school bus service in 58. So, I thought I had a couple more things here, but maybe. Yes, just 2 more things to read you, and then I'm out of your hair. This is a newspaper article that appeared, a very short one that appeared in the Missoulian in February of 1964. Bonner PTA play is Thursday and Friday, is the headline. Margie and the Wolfman, a 3-act play, will be presented by the Bonner Parent-Teacher Association as a fundraising project. Performances will be Thursday and Friday at the school with curtain time set for 8 p.m. both evenings. The director is Winnie Hintz, and the cast includes Aggie Nielsen, Bev Leary, Kay Hay, Helen Ellis, Dick Pataya, Kenneth Lizotte, Joanne Nichols, George Nichols, Bob Heyer, and Dennis Pleasant. Now, mind you, I'm not sure if you were able to find, we have a picture of it wasn't the same year, but of a PTA play that the parents used to put on, and you guys remember this, I don't remember it, but of people, including Fritz Thibodeau, Judy's father, dressed up in hula skirts. And it's one of my favorite pictures from the Demons collection that's over at the school, and now also online. And I'm looking real quick here to see if it's over there, but it may not be. Last thing, I've got something to read that's dated March 12th, 2014. It's the Bonner Lumberjack log that came out this week. And it says Bonner Schools Extended Campus. It's written by Principal Ashley Parks. We are fortunate in Bonner to be surrounded by many excellent outdoor resources. Our students demonstrate a passion for the outdoors by the variety of activities they participate in during their free time. Connecting students to their environment through outdoor education is a focus at Bonner School. Bonner School has 2 wonderful outdoor education resources adjacent to our campus. When I read this, I started thinking of Bonner School in 1889. The hill with the Bonner Bee and the Learning Park by the river create opportunities that most schools don't have easy access to. Our students have been using these resources for many years. We have decided to increase ease of access to these 2 sites by calling them our extended campus. This will reduce the amount of paperwork required by teachers before traveling with students to these 2 specific locations. The teachers will continue to notify the office that they will be at the extended campus and will carry all necessary emergency supplies. Help me, where's the one by the river?
I'm by the caboose over there, on the other side.
By the caboose, is that open now?
Not
Is-
yet.
Not to the public, I
No,
don't
it's not
think.
open yet.
Okay.
That's
kids can go
BDG. We put that together, and it's a part of the school program right now. And it's closed to the public because all the grass hasn't restored on that area.
Okay.
But it'll be open in 2015.
And the students can go over there.
They can go
Yeah, it's part of their campus, as I understand it. So that's kind of a cool addition. I'm out of here. The panel today, from left to right, we have my older sister, Kathy Milodragovich from Butte, Judy, Karl, Thibodeau Karl, and who just retired this past spring, and Don Felton, not Ron Felton, Don Felton, who was also the teacher, or a student and a teacher at Bonner. I'm going to let them talk a little bit about when they were here, and then we have some questions in the basket here that each of them are going to address, whether they want to or not. And for each question, we're also going to ask you, the audience, for some input, some observations. But to do that, we're going to do it with this traveling mic that I think Jim Willis is going to help us with. So if you have stories to add to these particular questions, just raise your hand and Jim will seek you out. We are under, we've got plenty of time, but we need to be wrapped up by 4 o'clock, and we're hoping that most of you will stay after and at least grab a pasty to go or have a pasty dinner at that time. Okay, Kathy, would you mind starting out who you are?
I am Kathy Milodragovich, and we live in Butte now. And I currently teach at Butte at a middle school. And I attended Bonner from 1958 to 1964, graduated in 8th grade, and I didn't realize that when I started 3rd grade here, we moved from Helena, that it was the new school. I guess I didn't realize that until I'm hearing Kim say that. I didn't know that it was a brand new school. And then I taught in Bonner from 1989 to 1995. Having a brother like him makes me a little self-conscious about dates because he can remember them that I can't. So
That's what this is for.
yeah. Anyway, and so that's my background right now.
All right. Let's see, I attended Bonner School, I don't know when, all 8 years, because I grew up here. And my sisters both attended Bonner School. My dad was on the school board for several years. He was on the school board when we built the new, I don't know, which school?
The middle one.
The middle one? I don't know. One of them over there. The library one.
Well, I mean the one that went beyond the office, the new office.
Okay.
The middle section.
The middle section, yeah.
On the board on that other, this part of the school.
Yeah, in this part of the
Right.
school, okay.
Oh, that's right.
And then I student taught here, and then I taught here for 42 years, because from 1971 till last year, and now I've subbed here, just since Christmas I've subbed a few times. That's an interesting job. I subbed in the kindergarten, and let me tell you, they earn their money. But it's been fun, and my husband, Hal, was the custodian over there and a bus driver over there, so been around here a long time. Good school, I think. Well, I don't know any other school, so I have to say it's a good school.
Don Felton. We moved here in 1954 to the, he mentioned idea of Nearman, the old Nearman place, that's where we moved to, old hand-hewn log house. Dad always said it was because he had to get the boys out of town, so we showed up here in the 2nd grade. Graduated with David Otto and some of those in 1961 from here. Went to high school and then the service, and finally got out and student taught here. And then finally in 1985, I taught for 18 years out here. So that's all I did.
Can I add one thing about Judy? She taught for 42 years here. The previous record, or the record, I guess, is in dispute. Maurice Darrington started in 1962-63 school year and retired in 2004. And my edition says that's 42 years as well. Judy tells me she didn't want to break the record because, well, why?
Well, when I saw Maurice last year when I retired, he told me, he said, "How many years did you teach?" And I said, 42. He said at Bonner, I said 42. He said, oh, good thing. He said, because when I broke Larry Burlingame's record, he said, he died. He said, and I said, oh my gosh. He said, well, I taught 43. And I said, well, thank goodness I stopped at 42. I don't want you to die. So I thought he taught 43. So I'm let him have the record. I don't want him to die. So I'm not sure.
I think you tied for the record.
Okay.
And
well, tie, and maybe he'll stay alive longer, I hope.
we also have very some long time teachers here at Bonner, here in the front row.
Marianne, too.
And Mary Ann Strothman, right? That if you guys wouldn't mind if I introduce you. If we have Lindsay Addington in the front row. Stand up, Lindsay. And Debbie Thrillkill in the front row. 4th grade mostly, right, Debbie?
Yes.
Almost all of my years were 4th grade, 38 years. And I had 4th and then a few combination grades, 3rd and 4th. Started though in that back band room. And often we'd be forgotten over there. So the bus would come and the bus would go, and here's Debbie with the whole group. Oh, well, those were interesting times with Leo Musburger.
Lindsay, you started at in that band room too, didn't you?
Yes, and that was the kindergarten room for
Yes.
so long.
Right.
Yes.
And you, for most of the time, were
I was 20 years in first grade, 15 in kindergarten, and 3 in second.
Before you retired last year.
Before I retired a couple years ago.
Mrs. Rothman?
I was the 7th and 8th grade English teacher.
For a long time?
You were English, not math.
That's right. I counted 20.
You should take shoes off.
So, I guess I'll do this. We're going to just pass, we have a number of topics to discuss, and we'll start at one end, and you just, Kathy, you pick out the first question.
Okay.
You will be required to answer it, or pass it, and then if you two would chip in with any observations, and then we'll turn it over to Jim with the mic for anybody that wants to add to it.
I'm really glad I stayed with Kim's family Friday night because I got to preview these questions. As students, we probably took the playgrounds of Bonner School for granted, but as elementary schools go, they are special. Share a playground memory from your childhood and from your teaching days. And I guess for me, I remember more from childhood. They took the merry-go-round, and we really had fun on the merry-go-round. But that went when I was a teacher. It was considered unsafe. I just remember that we had a lot less grass out there on the playground. We did a lot more. Like Kim said, I remember playing tag and kick the can, and recess was the best part of the day for a long time. So, and as a teacher, I guess I don't know. Maybe it's just doing recess duty and keeping the kids from arguing or whatever they do at recess. So that's what I remember.
I think I remember the bus garage, playing Eeny Eye Over or whatever on the bus garage when we were kids, and the students loved the bus garage. I also remember as a teacher we couldn't see what the kids were doing on the playground with the bus garage there because they were on the back side of it, and at one time there was only one teacher out on the playground, so it was hard to watch what was going on out there. And then I do remember I came up here the day what did they do? They tore the bus garage down. I thought that was a sad day to see that bus garage go away. But, you know, I thought that was pretty unique. I don't think too many playgrounds had a place where you could play the games the kids played on the bus garage and throw the ball, dodgeball against the, that we played. Mm-hmm. The kids loved the bus garage. And when it was gone that year in the fall, when the kids came back, they really felt bad. But the merry-go-round was a big thing, too.
Well, the one thing I remember is in the springtime, probably just a little bit later than this, Leo Musburger would never let you go on the grass if you're going to leave footprints or scuff up the grass or whatever. And so the first time he would let us run around there, and of course we'd take off our shoes so you could run faster. And that was always a big deal for the first few days that you could do that. But he always stood there and watched because he didn't want you to tear up the grass.
How about as a teacher?
As a teacher, geez, as a teacher, there wasn't really, I always thought that there wasn't very much left to do.
You need to talk about the 6th grade Hill project, because
Yes,
that was the first educational trip.
Well,
The way the money was used.
well, it was before they logged it, because I always hammer on them for the logging that. But yeah, for a long time, for quite a few years, Gene Solomon that lives down on Brickyard, under Brickyard Hill there, he and I wrote a book and all the worksheets and all that stuff. 4 different stations up on that hill. And we'd go up there. There was like 16 different stations, and we'd pair the kids up, and up we'd go for 3 hours a day for 6 weeks. And we used that hill quite extensively. I remember the first year we went up there, Jimmy and Rita Milligan were really upset because they looked up the hill from their house, and I had spread some pink ribbons around to mark one of the spots, and they thought they were building a road or doing whatever. Geez, I mean, they were really upset before they finally figured out what we were doing. But yes, we did use that an awful lot up there. And the idea that it's an extended campus, well, it was extended campus a long time ago. That's what I know.
Do we have any observations from the audience? Let's wait for the mic if you would.
I really don't need a mic, I don't think. As a teacher, I got in trouble actually. When the newest part of the school, you can't hear, okay. As a teacher, I got in trouble. When the newest part of the school was built, there was the part that goes behind the music building, and it's a sidewalk. And we had a really good year for ice. And I mean, I thought it was great. The kids were out there, 7th and 8th graders, and we were just skating down that thing, going, taking a run and going down as fast as we could. I ended up in the office. I got in a lot of trouble for that. I thought it was a lot of fun. The kids all had a good time. Of course, I didn't think too much about, broken arms or things like that, because when I went to school at St. Helena's and Cathedral, we used to get on our haunches and go all the way down that hill and down and slam into the school. So, this was a lot safer. So anyway, that's what I remember.
Any other recess memories?
I got a recess story.
Beating him now. Okay. Yeah, I was in about the 7th grade, and there used to be a barrel out next to the school. Lefty probably remembers that. They wouldn't have anything like that in sight anymore. You'd get on that and run until you fell off. And I was playing there, and Harold Tilsey came by, and he started pushing around, and we got in a fight. Now, I'm not a fighting person, I'm a lover. But we got in a fight, and we had to go see Mr. Lightfoot. And he made us write 3 times this letter, a definition of a gentleman. And it's in my album there if you want to read it. But you had to write it 3 times without a mistake. And finally, after, it must have taken a month, but I finally got through my 3, and Harold Tilsey hadn't finished his. So Mr. Lightfoot said I had to help him finish his. Well, that didn't feel right to me. And my mother very seldom interfered in anything in school, but she called up Mr. Lightfoot and she said, "This is wrong, and he's not going to do that." So I didn't have to do that. So I got the definition of a gentleman if anybody is interested. Yeah.
Ken, what class were you? Ken Pierce?
48.
Class of 48. So, if you wouldn't mind identifying yourselves as you grab the mic.
Mike would put a lot of people. You'd have lots of stories.
Raise your hand. Any others? Or should we move on to the next question?
That's you.
Describe a happy moment as a student, a fulfilling moment as a teacher. Oh. I would think as a student, maybe when I got a good report card, if I ever got one. My grades weren't too good. I think as a teacher, I think every morning when the kids come in with a happy smile on their faces, that was always a a good feeling to me.
Oh,
He's thinking.
Okay.
a moment.
Okay, a moment. One of the happy moments I remember as a student, and this is funny, in the spring, Mrs. Dufresne used to have us make these copper serving platters, and we would go outside and etch flowers on them, and then I think we gave them to parents for Mother's Day or something.
I remember that.
And that was always, I thought that was always really fun. I was trying to think of some of the things I remember. And then as a teacher, 5 years ago, we were in the thoroughfare area in Yellowstone Park, and it was longer than that ago. Anyway, there's only 100 people that get to use that. We were camped, and the rangers came through, and we introduced ourselves, and there was a ranger whose son was at Bonner when I was there, and she said he always remembered you and really liked what you did, which was real fulfilling to me to have that happen.
I was trying to think of a happy moment when I was a student. I'm not real sure I can do that.
So why'd you come back?
I don't know. That leaves a little bit to be desired. A happy moment, probably the people that other fellow students that I met, David Otto, Tommy Johnson, kind of helped my brother and I through the rocky points, I guess you would say. So the people that I met around here are probably the best moments I had as a student, because I had somebody to share the misery with, maybe. As a teacher, I guess I would have to kind of go along with Kathy in the idea that last year I ran into a person, of course, they stood about 6'7", and I knew them when they were about this big. And they knew me. Of course, I hadn't changed, but they had, and I said, "Who are you?" And so then that person told me, and he had moved to Alaska and had just come back, he and his wife and stuff, and he was talking about the idea of the Hill Project for one, and just Bonner in general, how he really cherished the time that he spent here. Of course, he spent most of his life, I think. Lifers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, Adrian. So, yeah, and he's really a tall boy. 6'7", I think, but something like that. But it was kind of neat. It's after the fact that you learn these things, I guess.
So the teachers or ex-students of the audience have something they want to say? Happy moments as a student.
I have to think about these.
Go ahead and identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Aislinn Addington, and I graduated in 1998 and went all through at Bonner. And I remember kind of growing up through the grades, the week of graduation was always really exciting to see, because there were these different sort of rituals the 8th graders got to do, and it was such a big deal to kind of watch them go and move up into it. And Mrs. Rothman had a lot to do with all those rituals that last week. And then when you finally got there, I just remember feeling so special that it was our turn to run down the hallway, and it was our turn to go up to the B, and it was finally our turn to come back the day after graduation, which of course we did. It was a day off, but we always came back to visit, and I thought that was so cool in our community. And then going to high school and college and talking about grade school with other people, no one else has had that kind of send off that we did. I thought that was a really cool thing that all the teachers kept going, for sure, and I hope it's still like that.
This one. This is really a strange question.
I would look for help.
Kim. Says, what nationally significant event or person do you associate with Bonner School? Well, not being the greatest student, I probably don't have a whole lot. But there's two people that I remember when I was going to school, one being Walter Hook. I don't know how much of a national figure he would be, but to me he was good. And the other was Mansfield. He came to Bonner School, and quite a lot of us students met him at one time, and I don't even know what he was doing there, but he was there. And so that's the only person that I know that would be of national significance.
How about event?
Events. National event. Let's see. I guess when I signed up in the Navy. I have no idea. You get to do it.
Here's the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know about people. Let's see. Event. I just remember I was teaching in the computer lab. Walked in one morning when 9/11 happened. I just remember walking in the door, and that was just a really frightening morning in the school. And then I remember when Mount St. Helens erupted, that we just couldn't go to school. Those were the two things that I remember really affecting the school. I'm sure there were others, but one a national one, but yeah, the explosion, the boiler explosion at the school. Because then I had to teach over here in the church. This was my classroom for about 2 months, right here where we're sitting. Both third grades taught in here. And we had, our lunchroom was actually in the kitchen there for 2 months. So, yeah, that was. So that was a local event, but it was kind of a interesting thing.
But the T-shirts went national, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did. Uh-huh. I just saw mine yesterday. Should have worn it. Yeah, down the basement.
What did they say?
I survived the Bonner blowout. Yeah. The boiler door actually blew by Hal's head. Thank goodness it didn't hit his head, but I don't know. Maybe it would have been good. I don't know. Knock some sense into him.
I remember you'd have to go home with him.
Yeah, that's right. He might not like that.
For me, I remember a school issue when I was teaching. They were, the second year I was teaching kids that have a harder time focusing, and they were building the new addition, the last addition onto the school. And our room was right on the edge of where they were doing the construction. So for the whole year, there were jackhammers going, and there were kindergartners sitting here that couldn't attend to task, and the jackhammers were going. And I just remember that was a pretty long year. I hope it's interesting because the mom I saw in West Yellowstone, it was one of her sons that I had, so it was good that he remembered that he learned something. And then I also remember the Kennedy assassination and how we just couldn't even understand what had happened. And then I also remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, because everyone was building bomb shelters and trying to put food in the bomb shelters, and it was a real scary time. I remember I just being afraid all the time. So those are the two things I remember as a student.
One of the things that prompted that question was something else that was in this book, a reminiscence by Jean Aiken Stemke, and she talked about when her father was the principal, and this would have been in 1927 after Lindbergh flew the Atlantic, and when he got back to America, maybe you knew this, he did a state-by-state tour, basically, of advocating for passenger and air transport. And so I'm going to read just the paragraph that she wrote in this. She said, "Dad was very pleased when Bonner School was honored by Charles Lindbergh. Mr. Lindbergh circled the school and dropped a greeting to the school. In the years that have passed, the paper has been misplaced. That would have been in September of 1927. So. How about the audience? Nationally significant event or person associated with Bonner School.
Okay, I'm up.
Okay.
Go back to history now.
Talking history now.
Thanks, Jim. Just talking to it? I'm not used to this. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. December 7th, 1941. I was in the 8th grade. And every radio, I think in Bonner, probably Milltown too, was announcing about the Japanese bomb in Pearl Harbor. Now this goes to the school part of it. So the next day, Mr. Aiken, he had the speakers out and everything, and we got to hear President Roosevelt's famous speech, how we declared war on Japanese. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Got lots more time here.
This question is, when you think of music at Bonner School, what do you think of? And I remember Mr. Burlingame, but I really remember Mrs. Dufresne. I remember any of the songs that I know that are considered songs you should know in your background. She taught us. I remember the Glee Club, that I think it was called Glee Club, and I remember we had performances at Mother's Day and at Christmas time, and she taught a lot of music, and a lot of what I know about music I learned from her, so that was really important to me.
Let's see, I remember Mrs. Dufresne also, but I remember we used to have band before school. So we had to come at 7:30. So Dad had to bring us. One morning he was bringing us to school, and I don't know what he was doing, but he was backing out of the driveway, and we all got in the car, and he backed out of the driveway, and he hit the fence post, and he wiped out all the windows on one side of his car. And it was a quiet ride to school. Yeah.
That's your music memory?
Well, we're coming to music. I do remember that.
Well, when I think about music, being not a very musical person, I quit band.
You quit band?
But I do remember Burley. Burley was one of the few guys I knew at that time that was good at music. And especially playing the piano like this. And of course, he played the march for graduation forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I know about music.
Lindsay Addington. I remember when I started teaching in 1973 that all of the rooms had a piano in them. And I just remember thinking that was amazing for a school, that music was so important that there was a piano in every room. And that there were several teachers, I wasn't one of them, but several at that time that played the piano so well. Mrs. Simmons, Mrs. Erickson. And you could, just walking down the hall in the morning, this beautiful piano music going up and down the hall. And that really was something that amazed me, and we had them for a long time.
Good.
I'm Jim Labby, and I graduated in '53 my 6th grade teacher, Margaret Strong, she made you sing. We had the old double desk, you know, and she would sit right in the seat with you, and she had this mouth harp thing, and she'd play a key or whatever, and you sang. Period. But I enjoyed her. Like my Uncle Willie said, I enjoyed every one of my teachers here at Bonner. They were all just good teachers.
Oh, that's that one where, yeah.
Yep, bullets.
Yeah, with Jim mentioned Mrs. Strong, she was my, she was my teacher in the 6th grade, and she taught us music. Well, I couldn't read one note from the next. But anyway, she taught us to recognize all of the instruments, starting with the piano and the drums, all of the wind instruments, all of the string instruments, the violin, the cello, and all of those. Anyway, somebody in the class mentioned about a banjo. She just come unglued. She says that is not an instrument. She must have hated a banjo, and I love the darn things anyway. But she was our teacher for music, and she tried to teach everybody how to read notes, and I think most of it went over the top of our heads like a dirigible, really, because I couldn't read one note from the next now, but I love music, so.
I got a Mrs. Strong story too.
Here. We gotta hear it again.
All right, I'll introduce myself this time. I'm Ken Pierce, but I also had Mrs. Strong in the 6th grade, and I went to school with Bill Lean, which a lot of you out here know. He passed away quite some time ago, but Bill never got anything but an A from the time he was in the 1st grade till we graduated high school. Very smart. But he went through music and he could not carry a note in a tin can. So he just struggled with music, and Mrs. Plan was going to fail him in music. And finally he made a deal with her, and he had to write a song with notes. And he did that, and she passed him and gave him an A.
Do we have any questions? We have one general question that we're going to end with, and then actually open it up to an open forum for people to talk about whatever they want to talk about. But we got a couple more questions left.
This one? Okay. Share a story about or observation about hair or clothing styles as a student than as a teacher. Well, I can tell you one as a teacher. You know, when I first started teaching, we always wore dresses, always. And we had this Thanksgiving dinner at Thanksgiving time, and you know, the school board members always came, and retired teachers, people came. And Mrs. Addington and I, one day for Thanksgiving, decided to wear pants. And my dad came, because he'd been on the school board, and
It was okay to wear pants.
it was okay to wear pants at that time, yeah. So we had pants on that day, and my dad came to the dinner, and Mr. Musburger was with him walking down the hall, and they came to our room and looked at us. I mean, they looked at us like, whoa, you are not dressed for school, because we had these pants on. So it took them a long time to think that teachers could wear pants to school, but nowadays, because it was really nice to be able to wear pants and get down on the floor and crawl around with the little kids, but it took a lot of people a long time to think that lady teachers could wear pants to school.
They were dressy. They were
Yeah, not jeans. And nowadays, you actually, I think at Bonner, you can wear nice jeans on Fridays if you wear a Bonner shirt. They have Bonner t-shirts that say Bonner School, so you can wear them. Kids, well, they don't have much of a dress code anymore. I think it's kind of scary. I think your pants are supposed to be as long as your fingertips. And when we went to school, you could wear pants underneath your dresses. I remember that.
It was cold.
When it was cold outside, yeah. But now it's, I don't know, when I subbed the other day, some of them already had shorts on because they thought it was spring. So, yeah.
Well, I look at this question and a couple things come to mind. One, the girls wearing the pants under their dresses when it was cold, and the short shorts. Had an awful time in the 6th and 7th grade with the short shorts. For some reason, girls think they had to wear, or some of the girls at least, had to wear short shorts. And the only thing I had that was really good was I had the ugliest long t-shirt. And if they ever wore short shorts, guess what they got to wear? That or call their mom. And I had one student that, and I'm sure that Mary Ann knows who I'm talking about, didn't want to wear the shirt, but I made her wear the shirt. She was right on the phone calling her mom, getting some new clothes because she didn't like that shirt. For sure. That's all I know.
I guess I think of this more impact as a student. We lived in Marshall grade, and we had to walk down the road to catch the bus, and girls still wore dresses, and so you would have to put on pants under your dresses, which look really stupid when you're like in 7th grade and you don't feel good anyway. But it would be so cold. I just remember we had to do that because you had to wear the dresses as a viewpoint of a girl. Then we get to school and run in the bathroom and, change all your clothes. So that's what I remember as a student.
Well, if we're talking about clothes, I remember the cans. And the farther out they would be, the better you liked them until you could hardly get on the school bus.
Yeah.
You'd crowd yourself in and you'd go like this and you'd finally get on the bus. But that was an awful era that we lived through. We thought it was wonderful at the time, but looking back on it, it was a hard time.
One year in my homeroom, 8th grade, I had a new student about every 3rd to 5th day, because she would come in with a different hair and different colors and different everything. And the final coup de grace was when she came at Christmas, and her hair, she had wrapped a whole string of lights in her hair. Well, I didn't care. I mean, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's just hair. Come on, let's, it all grows out or does what it needs to do. And she came in. I was in the furthest, in the new building, the furthest classroom on the left-hand side. And we had outlets in the floor. So I said, go for it. Plug yourself in. Which she did. which was cool. But I had more company that day than I think I ever had in my whole life. I think every teacher came down to check out this young lady. And we went through dreadlocks to totally bald, because then she decided she didn't like the dreadlocks and you couldn't get rid of them without shaving your head. It was incredible. Every 5 days. It was fun.
Dress codes in the 40s and 50s. Anybody want to talk to us about what you wore back then? Or hairstyles?
I'll tell a story. I'm a shy, quiet person. We used to have to wear...
Excuse me. Don't forget to identify yourself in the microphone.
Jim's got it over here.
Like this? My husband made me do this. When we were kids in Bonner, we had to walk to school, clear from Bonner. We didn't know that was a long way. They didn't run buses. But when it was cold, it was cold. And the one thing we had to do was wear long stockings, underwear actually, and we hated it. So we had to do it as long as there was snow on Sheep Mountain. And I think you all know where Sheep Mountain was. And sometimes the snow was there till we were swimming in the river. But anyway, we wore them because we were good. We minded till we got partway up here. And then we all took them and slid them down and rolled them up so that we still had anklets on. Only we had these big wads our boots and our shoes. And by the time we got to school, we were frozen. And of course, this was the old school where right inside the door, a very short ways, was great big vents in the floor because they had the wood slab furnace in the basement, and that's how they heated that two-story school. And so it came up through the floor roaring in the mornings, and we would all go crawling in the door and lay on that thing with our wet clothes and our big baggy socks, and we thought we were very fashionable. It was a lot of fun. That old school was really fun.
Any other clothing or hairstyle stories? Is there one more question in the basket?
Kathy had one more question there.
It's in the basket.
Oh, it's in the basket? Oh, you already did. It says share a story or observation about the smells of Bonner School. I have to think about this one. Do you have any smells?
Smells? Yeah.
What are they?
Well, cinnamon rolls.
Oh, yeah,
But when it rains outside and the kids come in, if they've had to stay on the playground, their hair smells. Yes.
In addition to the cinnamon rolls, I remember the rolls that they used to make, just the regular rolls that we would have for lunch sometimes. That would always, the lunchroom would smell so good. But I'm like Kim, one of the things I really remember is the smell of the teepee burner and the wood yard and all of that stuff. He sounds like he remembers that fondly. I just remember that it kind of made you sick. It got really strong in this. Remember every year when school started, and it would be all like in September when it was hot, and it would all just be foggy and smell. That's what I remember.
Well, the only thing I can really think about smells is when it was raining out and everybody was running and chasing one another. Usually when they walked in and sat down in the classroom, I always had to open the windows. I don't know about the rest of them, but I did.
Any other smell? You guys talk about the rain. I think of the smell of the rain on the asphalt in at recess. That's a distinctive smell.
Especially after it's been warm.
Yeah.
But what did it smell like when you opened up the coat closets? Sometimes.
Bob's gonna tell us.
My name's Bob Bateman, and Judy and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago. How many people remember the smell of Frank Dufresne's mop closet? Anybody?
How many I sent it to?
Mrs. Saunders would send us across the room and sit in the mop closet.
Uh-huh, yes.
If you weren't paying attention, you'd sit there for 20, 30 minutes
Mhm.
with the door shut, with those mops right in the buckets right there in front of you. Now that's the smell I remember. I think because some of us spent a lot of time.
Yes.
By the 60s, we called it the little dark room.
Mrs. Saunders, didn't you ever get sent
Mrs.
there?
Saunders, yeah.
You never got sent there?
Mrs. Saunders, I remember one time Mella Johnson got pretty upset at her and actually went and talked to Leo Musburger about her because she'd walk around with a pencil. And she used to always hit Tommy on the back of the ears with this pencil because he was always talking to somebody or something. And oh man, pretty soon his ears had little scabs on her.
She didn't send him to the closet?
Nope, she didn't send him to the closet. She just whacked him on the ear.
You never got in the closet?
I didn't. Boy, that's good. Have to ask Linda next summer.
Linda probably got in the closet.
Bobby, were you ever in the closet with Linda?
My name's Virginia, and I have a story about Mrs. Saunders. She was my 5th grade teacher, and I was scared to death to go to school for the 5th grade. But the summer before school started, just before school started, we went down and saw some old friends down in Sheridan, Montana. And I had to ride the bus back. I have never been by myself. And I remember the bus stopping in Butte, and everybody off this Greyhound bus got off, and here I am sitting all by myself. Because I was told, get on that bus and do not leave until you get to Milltown, Disbro's. That's the only time I could get off that bus. So I sat there by myself, and I was just, the guy come back, the bus driver, aren't you going to get off the bus? No, I got my lunch right here. He goes, well, come off the bus. I'll make sure you get back on the right bus. So he took me off the bus. He bought me some soda or something while I ate my little sack lunch, got me back on the bus, and introduced me to the bus driver. Lo and behold, the bus driver was Mrs. Saunders' I think nephew or something. It was a relative. And when she heard that, I felt like I was treated very good. I didn't worry about the closet.
We have a general question that I'm going to. Go ahead.
I just had a quick smell to add. Kim talked about the equipment room back, and I'd like to add to besides the rubber balls and everything else that was in there, those wool warm-ups, basketball warm-ups that was probably one of my fondest memories of going to school there was when I finally made A squad in the 7th grade, and we got to go down on game days and wear the tops to those old wool warm-ups. Got to wear them through class for all day. You got to wear those. So the smell of those was something special too.
Is that still a tradition?
They wear their tops to their uniforms.
The tops to the uniforms on game day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Boys and girls, I assume. He didn't identify himself. That's my brother, Tom Briggeman. Anybody else? We'll close then with this, and then we'll throw it open to, go ahead, Mac. Oh, we got a Burley story. And this can be answered by any of you in any order, but our general question here is, we're 125 years old at Bonner School now, and over the 125 years, Bonner School has been reinvented many times. What do you feel should be among its legacies? What should be the legacy of Bonner School?
Since I got to see this question before we got here today, I got to think about it, and I think the legacy is just the way that it's held the community together. Pillsville, West Riverside, Bonner, Milltown. I think that's the legacy of maintaining that community atmosphere, because it's always been here, and I think that's a good legacy to maintain.
I have no idea.
Well, you know, one of the things that I respect about Bonner and these communities is they taught you to have respect for people. You had respect for your teachers, your principals, you know, I mean, all the administration, the Fritz Thibodeaus, you know, I can go on with a lot of names. But they taught you respect, even when you left Bonner, all the way through high school and through your career, whatever it may have been. You have respect for people.
Debbie Threlkill again. I just want to say that you have, as a community, made a wonderful school out here, and that those 38 years were the best 38 years ever for me. I was offered a contract in Missoula. I was offered a contract at Bonner School, and I went to my teachers and counselor and said, gosh, which should I do? It's going to be a combination room out in Bonner, but it's going to be a straight third grade in Missoula. And they said, go to Bonner. It is the best school in the state. And in 1968 and before that, I think you heard the same sort of thing, that the teachers were all respected, that the children were all pretty much behaving themselves and were dealt with if not. And I've always been very, very proud. And the people that have this community are really wonderful. You don't realize until you come from some other huge environment. My high school in Great Falls was the largest graduating class ever with 650 kids there. And we're going to have our reunion this summer. And you know, you just don't have that feeling that you people do here. And it's you that have kept it that way. I hope it continues.
Legacies? Legacies of Bonner School?
I didn't go to, I'm Judy Matson. I didn't go to Bonner School, but my Gary's and my children did. And my most outstanding, we were just talking about this the other day, but one of my most outstanding memories of Bonner School was when my daughter started to kindergarten. Or first grade, there was no kindergarten here at the time. In fact, your mom had a private kindergarten for years, and that was the kindergarten. But so here was my little girl dressed up in her brand new dress with her new school shoes, tripping down the street, and the school bus came, and it was Jack Demon's first day on the job as far as meeting the students. He got off this bus, and he had this big paddle in his hand, and we just about died. But it was for the 8th grade boys and not for Laura. So she got to school, and she went tripping into her classroom, and there was Miss Walderskirchen, now Mrs. Addington, the most beautiful teacher in the whole world, and she had glasses with butterflies on them. And I think the legacy of Bonner School that comes through that story, it was a safe place. It had discipline, and it had love. So I think that's a great legacy for our school.
I think about the legacies, and I think about the camaraderie between people. I see Bill and Ed here and Mike and Bobby and other people that I knew, and they've formed other relationships and so on. And I know Judy and Bobby and my sister went to school together, and they still keep in touch. And my other younger sister and Levon's daughter went to school together. To this day, on their birthdays, they send us, of course, the card comes in a thing like this because it's their birthday cards back, they send back and forth over all these years since they were in grade school together. It costs them $2 to send it. And it's huge. They don't write much, but at least they keep in contact, and just these people staying in contact. And when I see Shirley Lady back there, I think about probably the first time I ever met her. Of course, she's way, way older than I. She was Judy and one of my sister's campfire. Oh, and yours. Yeah, but you're way young, so I didn't know her then. I was gone. But yeah, she was Linda and Judy's campfire teacher, and all these people have kind of stayed in contact with one another, or when they see them after 40 years, it's almost like they've never been gone. It's one of those things. And I know when I see David or Tommy Johnson, and he's been in Oregon now, Tommy has for, I don't know, 25 years or 30. But it's just like when we get together, he was here last fall for a week or so, and just like he never left. He lived up here at Bonner, and we lived down here, down the road, and David lived in between. So, I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. And so I think that's kind of a legacy. And then I see Billy Walker here, and he just like yesterday, although he's a little cleaner than the rest of us, but at least myself. But that's kind of a legacy that I think about. And I'm sure lots of other people of other generations that went to school at Bonner have the same feeling. So that's what I think about.
This is Ken Pierce again. Back in 1948, I was in the 8th grade, and they decided to establish a basketball team. And so there was 7th and 8th graders on the team, and there was no gym at the Bonner School at that time, so we would take our after school and go down to the Central School or the Lowell School, whichever one would allow us in to play basketball. And there was about 10 of us at that time that played ball, and it became, I think, one of the finest sports at Bonner School. And I'm sure glad to see it's still going.
Well, I guess I haven't identified myself. I'm Shirley Lady Coupland, and I grew up here and went to school here and married and moved to town. And then we moved and built on Chumra Loop. And so I've just always been here. And but to get back to being the campfire leader, Judy and Susie Bauer came down, and I was going to you, and they needed a campfire leader. Mrs. Had quit. She couldn't do it anymore. And would I just please do this? And I said, well, you know, I'm not really into this, but did we have a good time? But we'd have our meetings at the school, and then I'd take all the girls home, and as soon as we got down the road here and turned down to go to the Felton house, Linda wanted to drive in the 7th grade. And of course, no one was on that road. You go by Frank Bauer's dump and, you know, there was nobody there. So I'd get out and we'd change places and we'd get in. And she learned really how to drive. And I said, don't you dare tell anybody what we're doing, you know. But it was a lot of fun. And we did it, I think, for 2 years. I took the girls through the 7th and 8th grade. And we just really had a good time. But I do have so many memories of the girls at that age. Anyway.
In terms of legacy over 125 years, we probably shouldn't forget the mill and the unique relationship that the school had with the mill for all those years. The first trustee in that first school board in 1889 was Henry Hammond, who was who ran the mill, basically. A.B. Hammond's brother, and his other brother, help me, Miney.
Logging operations.
Ran the woods the logging operations. So the Hammonds essentially were those who built the first school. And then when the second school was built in 1907, by then it was Anaconda Company, and that was the land that school was built on was donated by the company, and the relationship that they had with the school, the Anaconda Company, I mean, with the school throughout until 1972 when they sold the Champion was, if it wasn't unique, it was certainly special. Judy's dad, Fritz Thibodeau, told the story of he was always on the school board, but he was always over at the mill. And when maybe Lubrecht or one of the bosses, when Fritz would go to the mill ownership, I guess, and say the school needs something, he said, "You take care of Fritz." And Fritz did, and we had remember those mesh red and green Christmas things we got at the Christmas program with the nuts and candy and the orange and the apple. That dated way back to William Aiken, and with the Shrine Circus tickets that the mill provided us. I mean, they could go on and on and on. The guard that watched the mill, that watched the school for all those years, was an Anaconda employee. The groundskeeper, I think, for most of those years was the Anaconda Company. So that, and we did lose that. Leo Musburger said after he retired a year or two after Anaconda Company sold out, and he said that was one of the reasons. We lost that connection, direct connection with the mill. Not that Champion did not have a good relationship with the school, but for most of those Anaconda years, come hell or high water, they made sure that the school got taken care of.
Did the school budget collapse though? The school budget collapsed when the mill?
No, I believe it probably increased.
It happened in Frenchtown, and why didn't it happen here?
What do you mean?
The Frenchtown paper mill, when it shut down, the Frenchtown school budget, they didn't know where the money was gonna come from.
The tax base is what.
Well, I think that's an issue now in the years since the mill has closed down for good. But yeah, there's others that could probably talk about that. They're doing a pretty good job though, on a shoestring budget.
Cliff Iverson, class of 47. I just wanted to expand on what Kim just said. One of my fondest memories when I was in the 7th grade, Mrs. Dufresne was our teacher. Many of you older people will remember Tony Petroff was the section foreman over here. I think he took care of the line from the Milwaukee line to the mill here. The logs came in both railroads. She looked out the window one day, and if you remember, there was a rope that went from the bell tower, the bell, and I think it went clear to the basement. I know it went to the first floor. She knew something was wrong. Tony came running. I don't think he was 5 feet tall. The weeds were almost as tall as he was. She went out and rang that bell and evacuated the school. And sure enough, the roof was on fire. But to expand on what Kim said, there was no fire department, no volunteer, nothing at the mill, but they came with every man and every piece of equipment that they could gather and went up on that roof and saved the building. If it hadn't been for little Tony and Mrs. Dufresne, we probably wouldn't have had that school after that date.
When I went into high school in town, we were the Bonner boys, and I think they thought that was condescending. I thought it was pretty neat. Let's open it up now. Any stories, anything that's popped into your mind that you'd like to share, and that includes panelists or anyone else. I know Mac Palmer has a story.
Well, I'm Mac Palmer, and as everybody here knows, I think I'm not from Bonner or even from Montana. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, but I've been part of this history group for several years now, coming to the things, and I'm really impressed with what I've learned about this today and earlier. But the story I want to tell is about Larry Burlingame. I've heard his name several times, and maybe you know this about him. He and I worked together in the AARP driver safety program for several years, and this is a story he told me on himself. He was colorblind, and one day some of the kids noticed that he had one blue sock and one brown sock on, and called it to his attention, and he said, "Yeah, I've got another pair just like that at home."
I noticed of all of the teachers in here that one has never been mentioned was my 7th grade teacher, and her name was Miss Pazer. And I was in the 1st grade at the time that this happened, but noon hour the boys were all out there playing football out there in the old rocky field that we had. And Pete Carlson, he was the oldest one, and also my brother, he was in the 8th grade. Well, anyway, the first bell rang and nobody showed up. So Miss Pazer come out to round up the kids to come back into class. Well, anyway, Pete, he was way down at the other end of the field, and my brother Buzz, he was clear up the other end. And Pete hollered, Buzz, he says, "Heads up," and he grabbed the football and he hurled it down the field. Miss Pazer, she was walking out on the field. She didn't see it coming. And it nailed her right alongside of the head. Left a big imprint of that old muddy football on the side of her head. Well, she never said anything or bawled the boys out or punished them anyway, 'cause it was just her fault. She walked right out into the middle of it, and she got nailed, a good one.
Probably happened to you guys a few times.
Glenn, would you tell, when you get a chance, tell your story about Mrs. Dufresne and your English paper?
Okay, bring that more here.
He's got somebody else.
Oh.
Rick Swanson, and I remember, I have some memories of school. Walking from Milltown in wintertime after a blizzard, we would walk along the fence and walk the top of the snowdrifts to school, back and forth. There was no bus then. And other times, the kids, like Kenny talked about, the barrel. We had a barrel, round barrel that we run and jump on and go over. Also, they had the swings. I remember once they had a game called, I don't remember what it was called, but when you were on the swing and you went backwards to see who could jump the farthest back. Well, I was trying that too, you know, and I ended up with a broken arm and a sprained wrist. So it was something else, and I forgot it already. They call that, you know, senior moment. It came to me, they were talking about the school bus. Karl Johnson, if you remember him, we had the long yellow bus. And this was in high school, but it was out here anyway. And they would pick us up and take us into the high school. Some of the fellas got into a scuffle on the bus one day, and he had a strict rule. Any horseplay, out you go. The guys had to get off and walk home. He was very strict too.
Okay, Bonner hooligan here. Milodragovich, my 7th grade teacher. We were studying Montana history and on the subject of George Armstrong Custer. So when we got all through the course, I was to write an essay on Mr. Custer. So rather than, you know, I was not that good at words or anything, so I took my sheet of paper and I filled that as full of arrows as I could, all raining down on this little stick man sitting on a horse. Turned that in thinking, you know, I put a lot of work on them damn arrows. I had to get something. Biggest, reddest F I ever saw. But the end of that story, it didn't happen until I was in the service. And of course, if you're in the Army, you know, you want to get some rank. So I signed up for an NCO Academy. And part of the NCO Academy was, believe it or not, George Armstrong Custer. And it was the spirit of an order, is what they call that. If you're given an order, how far to the left of that order can you deviate, and how far to the right can you deviate but still carry out the order? And I passed that course. I got through that one real good. But Mildred Dufresne was with me every step of the way through that NCO Academy.
I guess it's 4 o'clock. We probably better call it quits here. We got one more. We got another story.
I'm Bob Bateman again. I guess I'm just going to leave you with this. How many people remember Larry Burlingame's ruler? I don't know why all the discipline always comes up. It's slapping you on the hand for being okay. Now I bet a lot more people remember Vandergrift's paddle back in the stinky old basketball room.
Yeah.
Remember that? It's about this high. Had 5 holes in. I don't know why 5, but it had 5 holes in it. Jagged top. You could either get smacked with the paddle or you'd call your folks. So I just thought maybe somebody else had it. Everybody was just nicer than Don and Judy, I guess.
I visited that paddle a time or two.
Maybe that's going
Jim, could we have the mic up here? Doug Lawrence is going to talk about our transition for those who want to stay.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, well, we're going to welcome everybody to our first annual St. Patrick's Day Patsy Dinner. What we're going to need to do is just kind of give us time to set 3 rows of tables down through here and put some tablecloths on and wash them. It should take us just 5 minutes to set up, and then we'll be ready to serve. If anybody would like to buy some because they don't want to stay with us, we'll have those available. We're looking for maybe donations of $5 a Patsy. Questions? And then we wish you everybody a very happy and safe St. Patrick's Day tomorrow.
Judy, do you want to sign off for us, or? Hi.
Again, thanks everybody for coming. This is the last of our programs for 2014, but we've already got some ideas for next year and hope to see you back. And we really do appreciate the fact that we can have our meetings here, so I hope that if it's all possible, you'll stay for supper, get a yummy pasty, or maybe you're like Gary and me, we are going to have to take off, but I'm sure taking some home with me so I don't have to cook later. So thanks for coming, and thanks for a great series this year.